Usually when we picture history or, even our own personal past, we picture it as something solid, like a stone monument.
Right, or a textbook just filed away in a cabinet
Yeah,
somewhere.
exactly. It's fixed. We stand on top of it looking back at this immovable thing. But if you step into the worldview of the water tribes during the Saryuna era, that stone monument instantly crumbles into liquid.
It just dissolves.
Yeah. History is not a textbook to them. It is a river. And you aren't standing on the banks observing it, you are literally swimming in it. Welcome back, learner. We have got an incredible deep dive for you today.
We really do. And that river analogy it's a radically different way to orient yourself in the world.
It changes everything.
It does. So what we are looking at today is a fascinating, almost meditative philosophical document from that Saryuna era. And for context, this was a profound post-war period.
Right, they had finally found some peace, right.
It's exactly. After generations of global conflict and just, well, mere survival, the water tribes finally had stability. They didn't have to rebuild their philosophy from scratch. Instead, their ancient survival-tested wisdom finally had the warmth and the space to just bloom.
And we're looking at how that expansion codified into four core pillars of water, which are memory, flow, nourishment, and cycle.
Those four pillars govern absolutely everything for them.
And the goal for us today is to explore how this incredibly specific, ancient elemental philosophy maps directly onto our modern lives. Because it's honestly a blueprint for adaptability, for healing, and for understanding that life isn't a problem to be solved, it's a current to be inhabited.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
We aren't just talking about magic here, are we?
Not at all. We are talking about a totally unified worldview. Geography, ethics, trauma recovery, it all flows from the exact same source.
I love that. So where do we start?
Well, to understand the philosophy, we first have to look at the ground they stood on. Or rather, the ice and the mud they lived in.
Because the text makes it very clear that you cannot separate their worldview from their environment. It naturally takes different shapes. The northern tribe's understanding of water is vastly different from, say, the swamp communities.
But the philosophy treats both as fundamentally true.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, so let's start up north. The environment there is rigid. It's ice. And the text describes the northern practitioners as the great keepers of water's memory.
Right, they believe they can literally read the history of a landscape in the water itself.
And they don't treat that as a metaphor at all.
No, mechanically speaking, they understand that water physically carries a specific quality, like a resonance, from the
Yeah.
environments it has flowed through.
Wow.
And the northern benders developed this incredible sensory capacity to just tune into that resonance. But where it gets really illustrative, I think, is their architecture.
Oh, the ice buildings. This part blew my mind.
Right. They build these massive, breathtaking ice structures, but they deliberately design them not to last.
Which completely inverts how we approach building today. I mean, we pour concrete and forge steel specifically because we want to defy time. We want our buildings to look exactly the same in 100 years.
We want permanence.
Yeah.
But the northern architects, they view that kind of permanence as well as a kind of arrogance, really.
An arrogance against nature.
Exactly. Instead, they refer to their buildings as crystallized intention. When a northern architect builds a dome, they aren't just stacking blocks of ice.
They're coaxing it.
Yes, they coax the water into a specific thermal lattice, essentially setting a blueprint. And then they just let the ambient environment interact with it.
So as the sun's angle shifts throughout the year, causing partial melting and refreezing, the structure literally evolves. It breathes with the seasons.
They initiate a form and then let the world finish the sentence.
That is such a beautiful way to put it, making its temporary nature a feature, not a flaw.
Precisely. They understand ice simply as water that has chosen a temporary shape. So a building melting isn't a failure of the architecture. It's just the natural progression of the material returning to the flow.
Okay, now contrast that meticulous, structured engagement with water in the north with what happens in the swamp communities.
It is a complete inversion.
Totally. The swamp benders don't structure their environment at all, they just dissolve into it. The text notes that they view individual separateness as merely a useful simplification.
I think useful simplification is one of the most striking phrases in the entire document.
Same here.
Because we rely so heavily on the illusion that, I end at my skin and the rest of the world begins.
But the swamp benders experience the exact opposite as a continuous, perceptible reality. Because water is in the vines, it's in the mud, the insects, the roots, and because they can sense that water, They physically feel the interconnectedness of the entire ecosystem at all times.
They can't just turn it off.
Right. It makes me think of an open source emotional internet or like a shared mycelial network. It completely blurs the line between where you end and the world begins.
And just imagine the sensory overload of that. The text documents these accounts of northern or city-dwelling visitors who traveled to the swamps.
No, the ones who basically had panic attacks.
Yes, severe psychological distress initially.
Hmm.
I mean, if you're used to tight boundaries, suddenly feeling the biological rhythm of 1,000 trees and animals all around you, it feels like a complete loss of self.
Right, because you literally can't log off. But the text also notes that if those visitors stuck it out, if they stayed long enough to adapt, they described it as the most deeply relieving experience of their lives.
The anxiety of having to hold yourself together constantly just evaporates.
Because you feel in your actual nervous system that you are held by everything around you. It's wild.
It really is.
Hmm.
Which is an incredible transition into the third geographical expression we see in this philosophy, the ocean practitioners. Because if the swamp is about the overwhelming density of life, the open ocean is about the absolute absence of it.
These are the benders who sail out into the open sea for years at a time, right? And they aren't out there trying to assert dominance over the waves.
They couldn't, even if they tried. The scale is simply too massive. Mechanically, an ocean practitioner survives not by forcing a path through the water, but by matching the frequency of the ocean's swells.
They align their own internal rhythms to that much longer, slower, deeper memory of the sea.
And the psychological result of that is fascinating. Engaging with a force vastly larger than themselves teaches them what it actually feels like to be genuinely, undeniably small.
Which we usually associate with feeling threatened or just insignificant.
Right, but out there, they find that smallness to be deeply restful.
I mean, think about the modern pressure you and I face every day to be the main character of our lives, to manage our careers, our families, our personal brands.
It's exhausting.
It is. There is a profound relief in stepping into an environment that reminds you, point blank, that you are not the biggest thing in the room. You do not have to control the tide. You just have to float.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, whether it is the seasonal memory of the North, the radical interdependence of the swamp, or the ego-dissolving vastness of the ocean, the philosophy recognizes them all as expressions of the same truth. Everything is connected and everything is upstream of everything else.
But, and this is a big but, that level of connection implies a terrifying level of access.
It certainly does.
If you can reach out and sense the water moving inside a swamp vine, or align with the water in the ocean, it means you also have the capacity to access the water inside another living being.
And we really cannot discuss the cultural evolution of the water tribes without addressing the immense shadow that capacity created.
Right, because the foundational ethical principle of the water tribes in this era is following before leading.
Yes. You enter the waters movement, you understand its momentum, and you offer a gentle redirection, a suggestion, really.
But the dark mirror to that principle, here's where it gets really interesting, is bloodbending.
It is the ultimate philosophical violation.
The text treats bloodbending as far more than just a forbidden martial art or a scary technique. It is the intimate knowledge of someone's interior used to completely override their autonomy.
It calls it nourishment become domination.
Which is such a chilling phrase. You are taking the literal substance of life, the water inside someone's veins and organs, and turning it into a puppeteer's string.
Because water's fundamental nature is to flow freely, to nourish without imposing. So, to force another person's body to move against their will is to take the deepest, most vulnerable intimacy possible and weaponize it.
It is the destruction of trust at a cellular level.
Exactly.
Wait, let me pose a philosophical pushback here, though,
Yeah.
something I was thinking about while reading. If the supreme ethical failing is imposing your will on another living thing's interior, how do they justify bending the water in plants? Or, redirecting a river that an entire ecosystem relies on? Bending itself is inherently an act of alteration. Aren't they always imposing to some degree?
That is a great point, and it's exactly the kind of philosophical tension the scholars of the Sauriana era debated extensively. The distinction they draw is between redirecting a current and usurping a sovereign interior.
Okay, break that down for me.
So, redirecting a river is engaging in a dialogue with the environment. The river still acts like a river, it just flows in a new channel. Even bending water from a vine is viewed as a localized exchange within the broader ecosystem.
Right, it's give and take.
But an individual human consciousness, a sovereign mind, relies entirely on the autonomy of its physical vessel. To hijack that vessel is to imprison the consciousness inside its own body.
Ah, I see.
It crosses the line from ecological dialogue into absolute tyranny.
That distinction makes a lot of sense. And isn't it a profound paradox that the water tribe's unmatched capacity for healing was born directly from understanding their greatest capacity for violation?
The shadow created the light. That painful clarity is exactly why their healing practices became so sophisticated, because they knew the horrific cost of misusing intimate knowledge. Their healing practices developed an absolute, unshakable insistence on consent.
Genuine healing in their framework just cannot happen if you override the patient's authority over their own body.
You can't fix someone by overriding their own authority.
Yeah.
You can't just forcefully knit someone's tissues together or flesh out an illness if their system isn't ready.
Even if you mean well.
Exactly. Even if the healer is perfectly well-intentioned, forcing the patient's interior to change is still a violation. It treats the body as an object to be repaired rather than a process to be supported. Healing must honor the autonomy, the pace, and the readiness of the person in pain.
And because they refuse to override that autonomy, their approach to human suffering, specifically complex emotional suffering like grief and trauma, looks radically different from our modern impulse to just fix things.
This is where the ancient text provides such a clear, almost uncomfortable mirror for modern psychology. Let's look at how they conceptualize grief.
Let's do it.
In their tradition, grief is not a problem to be solved. It's not an illness to be cured. It is a process to be accompanied.
And the document provides this stunning definition. It says, grief is what love becomes when it encounters loss.
Still love.
Yeah, it's just water doing what water does, moving, adapting, and finding a new shape when the landscape suddenly changes.
So what does a healer actually do in that scenario? They don't try to speed up the emotional processing. They don't offer platitudes or try to reframe the loss to make the person stop crying.
Mechanically speaking, a water tribe healer will physically sit with the patient and use their own regulated physiological rhythms, like their breathing, their steady heartbeat, to create a sympathetic resonance.
They tune into the patient's dysregulated nervous system and act as a steadying anchor.
They simply sit in the water of that grief so the person doesn't have to navigate the current alone. Think about how often you or I or anyone listening rushes to comfort a friend who is hurting. We instinctively say, oh, it's going to be okay. Or look on the bright side.
Time heals all wounds.
Right. We desperately try to solve their sadness. But the text points out something incredibly confronting. It asserts that the desire to fix someone else's grief is usually about the healer's discomfort, not the grieving person's need.
It's the ego wanting to feel helpful.
Mm.
The grieving person doesn't need a solution. They need presence. They need a witness who isn't terrified of the depth of the water they are currently drowning in.
Wow.
It is following before leading, applied directly to emotional care. You join them where they are. You don't drag them to the shore before they are ready.
That exact same principle dictates how they handle trauma, too, which the Northern tradition beautifully conceptualizes as frozen water.
Frozen water. It is a brilliant physiological metaphor. An overwhelming experience happens, but the nervous system cannot complete its natural response. The energy can't flow through the body.
So it halts, it solidifies.
The memory literally gets stuck in the tissue.
Oh, and the healer's goal isn't to chisel away that ice or erase the memory, right? Because you can't unhappen what happened.
No, you can't. The goal is to change the body's relationship to the memory. The healer works to create enough ambient warmth, enough relational and physical safety, so that the frozen water can begin to thaw at a pace the person's system can handle.
But they have to modulate that warmth incredibly carefully. What happens if they rush it?
Well, if you push too fast or force the patient to confront the trauma before they have the capacity to process it, you overwhelm the system again. You cause re-traumatization.
Ah.
The text describes this as the melted water suddenly freezing again, but this time the ice is harder and more jagged. You cannot throw boiling water on a glacier and expect a smooth river. You have to wait for the season to change.
That makes total sense.
This raises an important question, though. How do we actually create that warmth? In our own lives, how do we nourish ourselves to allow this thawing?
Right, which brings us to the concept of nourishment, another core pillar. And they define nourishment far more broadly than just caloric intake.
Absolutely. They argue that you can eat 3 square meals a day, be perfectly physically healthy, and still be experiencing severe spiritual dehydration.
Because we require relational nourishment just as much as we require physical water. We need safe physical touch, we need our emotions to be witnessed by others, and we need a connection to a community or a purpose larger than ourselves.
And what I found so refreshing is that this philosophy has absolutely zero tolerance for the kind of hyper-independent lone wolf mindset that we idolize today.
Oh, modern hustle culture loves the narrative of the self-made person who doesn't need anyone, the guy who just grinds it out alone.
The text dismantles that completely. It has a deeply resonant line regarding this exact attitude. It
Hmm.
says, a plant refusing water on principle isn't strong. It's just dying with its dignity intact.
Ouch. That is such a sharp critique of how we view vulnerability today. We think putting up a wall and isolating ourselves protects us. We think needing people is a liability.
But genuine autonomy in the Sorayuna framework is not about not needing anyone. True autonomy is having the self-awareness to know exactly what kind of nourishment you need and having the courage to actively seek it out.
Refusing to drink when you are thirsty isn't a victory of the will, it's a failure to participate in the cycle of life.
Nourishment is the fundamental condition of being alive.
It all cycles back to that, participating in the flow.
It really does.
When we zoom out and look at this entire stack of historical and philosophical sources across the northern ice, the swamp vines, the ocean expanses, and the incredible ethical rigor of their healers, you really see the whole picture come together. Life is a current. You are mostly water.
Literally and metaphorically.
Yeah. The rain that fell on the ancient temples of the Saryuna era is the exact same water flowing through your veins today. You have always been part of a moving system.
So true.
So what does this all mean? It means that the things that seem permanent are just temporary forms. The stagnant can flow again. The external forms of your life will change. Your job, your relationships, your physical environment, but the current remains.
You just have to find the flow running underneath whatever disruption you are currently facing and trust it to carry you forward.
Exactly.
I want to leave you with a final meditative challenge to mull over, building on the sources we discussed today, especially that idea of trauma or stubbornness acting as frozen water.
Ooh, I like this.
I want you to mentally scan your own life right now and locate an area that feels frozen. Maybe it's an old bitter grudge you're holding on to because it feels like armor. Maybe it's an outdated version of your own identity that you're desperately trying to defend, or a grief you've been trying to force into a rigid, permanent shape.
Just a block of ice you're carrying around.
Right. Ask yourself what would actually happen if, rather than fighting so hard to maintain that ice, you just allowed the season to change? What if you let it melt and trusted the current to carry you forward?
Let the ice melt. Such a beautiful and challenging thought to take with us. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious and keep flowing.